Hello, and welcome to the first episode in this series of DM logs. My name is Cliff. I'm a DM for I guess, large, based on what I've read on the internet, group of people. I now have 6 players. I haven't been DMing all that long, less than a year, so I'm still pretty new to it. But this DM log is going to cover my Hot Springs Island campaign, which we are just starting. We've already done session 0, and we're going to be doing session 1 tomorrow. It's the middle of November right now, 2018. My goal for these videos is to share my session prep, and I'll also share a sort of build log of the terrain and miniatures and whatever other props I decide to use for the campaign. It depends on how long the episodes end up. I may end up separating those two things, but I'm not an expert at any of that, so I don't expect to go into too much detail, except for maybe the session prep and retrospective. There's a lot of other channels which I've learned from to do terrain and miniatures. This probably isn't going to be a very educational series in that I'm not an expert. I've only been DMing for just under a year. We did one campaign which we kind of stopped in the middle. That campaign had 15, 16 sessions, so we go about every 2 weeks, although we've had some longer pauses in there, just because we're all, mid-30s adults or older, and it's hard to find the time sometimes. So it's not going to be very educational in that sense, but hopefully be able to get something out of it. And I hope that I expect that doing this and sharing the process will make me a better DM. I don't know. In this episode, I'm going to talk about what we determined in session 0, and my plans for session 1, which is tomorrow. I expect this campaign is going to be fairly long, barring some sort of TPK. I wouldn't be surprised if it lasts more than a year, 2 years, 3 years. Just the rate at which we can schedule games is usually at most every 2 weeks. Sometimes we manage one a few weeks in a row. So the problems at first. So first, let me talk about why we stopped our last campaign and are jumping to this one. The last campaign, I started it from the starter set, so it started off. I ran it's Mines of Phandelver for the group, and then I tried to sort of twist that into another campaign or into a longer campaign. I ended up giving them a deck of many things at level 3, just for shits and giggles, and it was interesting. It took over the campaign, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Because I went somewhere with it. I sent them to this wizard's tower where they were trying to solve some problems that the deck had caused for them. And all of that was pretty interesting, but it ended up overriding the story that had built up so far. And none of that is necessarily a problem. I could have continued that, and we may go back to those characters. Several of the players really like those characters, and so I don't think we're necessarily done with that campaign. We may have one-offs here and there with those characters. The main problem I think that campaign had is that we did not do a session 0. A few of the people in the group were new to D&D, and I hadn't DM'd much at all, but it's been more than 10 years since I've played D&D before that. So I don't think I'd even ever heard of a Session Zero before then. But I started watching a lot of, DM tip videos and things like that. And there was a real lack of party cohesion. So, like, we had, a couple sort of roguish characters. No one was a rogue, but, people with shady backgrounds. We had people, it doesn't matter too much. But the problem is that nobody knew, there was no clear motivation for the characters from the start other than find loot. And even that wasn't very tangible. So the Minds of Phandelver actually doesn't really offer that much loot as a hook. There is loot in it, but the hooks are more roleplay centric, which is good. Okay, so if you have a party that doesn't really feel connected to the roleplay element of the adventure that they're doing, then there's constantly questions of, like, why are we doing this? Does this make sense? And we did run into that a lot. The second part of the campaign, after the deck of many things, they were a lot more invested because they had personal problems to solve. And so really the campaign had started to pick up a good direction. But there were still a few members who, it wasn't really their problem, things like that. And so I just kind of wanted to reboot and try something a little different for a while. And all of my players are, for the most part, really into the idea of Hot Springs Island. So let me talk about Hot Springs Island for a minute, if you do not know what it is. There's a lot of popular videos about Hot Springs Island, reviews anyway. Questing Beast did a pretty good review of it, and I know I've heard of it. It's come up in other places, so if you found my video, it's pretty unlikely you've never heard of it. But anyway, Hot Springs Island is it's a 2-book set. They come in PDFs as well, but I got the physical books because I like physical things. So it's pretty interesting. There is a field guide to Hot Springs Island, which you can give to the players, and I think I already have given it to the players, basically. With the field guide, the players get a somewhat in-depth glimpse into what is going on this island. You can see the island here. So it's a fairly small hex crawl adventure or campaign. However, there's a lot of detail in every hex. There's several things they can explore in every hex, and there's several factions at play. So even though it's a small island, there's really a lot going on. And another reason I think this campaign is going to last a long time is that, we don't get to start until fairly late, 9 o'clock usually, after the kids go to bed, and then, so we can't play for very long. We play remotely. I set up the table, so me and my wife play. I set up the table, and I stream to my players what I'm doing, or the miniatures and the game board. Like, at a glimpse, it looks like it might be a small setting which would only lead to a small campaign, which absolutely you could extend beyond this, of course. But our group, we only get about 3 hours to play in every session, and then we only play every 2 weeks usually. So even a small amount of content would last us a long time. But this actually has a large amount of content because the island is very dense with content. Every hex has, I believe every single one has 3 things going on. And then there are multiple factions, there's a lot of items, there's a lot of NPCs. So really there's a lot to dig into here. And on top of that, I don't think they're going to be stuck on the island for the entire campaign. So this is going to last us a long, long time. But I kind of digress. So the basics of Hot Springs Island is it's a hex crawl. There's 3 things per hex. It's kind of a jungle survival setting. There's a lot of beasts and monsters just wandering around the island. There's several factions. There's lizard men, there's ogres, there's more lizard men. And then there's, of course, the Martell Company, which is sort of where the field guide, the idea of the field guide comes from. The idea that there's this trading company which has led some exploration into the island, and it's kind of their findings. So that's important to know in my session prep, because we're going to be talking about the Martell Company a bit. What else? So the DM gets this second book, which has all of the location details. It has all the faction details. It has a bunch of items and NPCs and all the monsters, but nothing is statted. So that's another thing. This is system neutral, so I have to stat everything, which, is going to take some time. There are some people who have already made stats, but I doubt they're going to be perfect for my campaign, so I'll have to at least modify those. Yeah, I think that's enough about that. Anything that comes up in here as I'm prepping, I'll talk about as it comes up. So let me go ahead and talk about Session 0, which we've already done. So half of Session 0, I was talking to the players about the nature of the campaign, the mechanics of Hot Springs Island. I've already said this multiple times, but it's a hex crawl. There are random encounters as you move through the hexes. They suggest using watches as your time mechanic, which I'm going to do. There's an exploration mechanic, which means you have to kind of try to find things in every hex. And most of that's pretty simple, but it all takes time measured in watches, which are 4-hour blocks, so there's 6 watches per day. I kind of warned them that this is going to be a higher danger campaign than the last one they played. We didn't have any deaths in the last campaign, but the last campaign was a fairly safe campaign for most of it. The starting material is fairly safe. Overall, 5th edition is fairly safe. But I think with the way that Hot Springs Island works and how I plan to stat things, it should be fairly dangerous, mostly due to the numbers at play. There are factions with lots of members, right? So you're basically dealing with armies, and you're dealing with beasts that may travel in packs. And you may have a few isolated beasts which are quite large and quite dangerous. The other thing that I'm doing, I'm modifying from base D&D for this campaign is the rest mechanic. All I'm doing is changing the time of rest, partly to sync up with the watches. So a short rest is going to be 1 watch. A long rest is going to be 4 watches in 6. And the reason I'm doing that is that I basically want them to have rest days and not trying to necessarily do a long rest every day. I'm not sure exactly how this is going to play out, to be honest. I could see how they may basically just say, well, we'll just have 1 encounter per day and we'll spend the rest of the day resting. So to prevent that, we are going to have random encounters which may move them towards breaking this long rest if they don't commit to it. My thinking with that is basically you'll have a 2 out of 6 chance of encounter. Probability is 2 out of 6 encounter. What I'm hoping will happen is that they'll take 1 short rest every day, 1 or 2, and that'll basically cover their sleep, their daily sleep. If they don't sleep, they'll start having to roll for exhaustion. But I expect that they'll take short rests every day. So this makes short rest more important, which in my first campaign, they hardly ever short rested. They would usually find a time to long rest, unless I went way out of my way to kind of make the story prevent them from long resting. So in those cases, they would also skip their short rests a lot of the time, which is pretty dangerous, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. So I'm hoping to make short rests more important. Long rests take more time, so it's like you're actually having to set aside this time to sort of recuperate and like reset your abilities. One large reason I'm doing this is that I want them to blow through time more quickly than they did in the first campaign. So I think in 16 sessions, they actually only covered... It was just about 2 weeks of game time. And a week of that was actually travel. So really, they only covered about 7 days. 2 sessions might be 1 day of in-game time. And I felt like time in the game was moving too slowly. They had things that would reset on a like monthly or weekly schedule, and at that rate, they were never going to hit those. So we need something thrown in which gives them a natural push towards some downtime. So that's why I'm hoping they set aside a day for long rests, even though an encounter might happen. I believe this mechanic is in the DMG, the sleep mechanic, and actually extending the length of your rests. There are some suggestions in the DMG. One is to shorten them for like epic campaigns, and another is to lengthen them for more like political campaigns. This isn't quite a completely political campaign, but since factions are involved, it's kind of political. And the feeling I'm really trying to build with this campaign is that feeling of like being stuck on an island and needing to sort of fight for your survival. And I expect there to be things like camp building and like, trying to figure out, solve problems that the island is presenting to them, not just encounter-wise, but just general survival-wise. And I'm hoping to sort of emulate that with the needing to have like days to just get their shit together. So that was something we had to discuss a bit. So some other things. So that's some mechanics. Other mechanics we're starting them at level 5. They ended the last campaign at level 6. I'm going to start them at level 5, mostly from their request. It kind of makes sense in the setting. If it's such a high danger setting, it makes sense that they would need to be a little bit more beefy to survive. They were kind of worried. They wanted that. Basically, they wanted to start the game with the second attack. And I can understand that. Turns can take a while, and people want to be able to do a little bit more on their turn. I let them pick feats, as long as they're in the player's handbook. We are going to use encumbrance for items and gold, so we're using D&D Beyond to track everything. That should be an interesting thing that they didn't have to deal with. We didn't use encumbrance at all in the first campaign. And then I basically I let them roll for some starting gold, and I let them pick some magical starting equipment. It's called the Sane Magic Item Prices list. I'll put a link to that in the description below, because I find it quite useful. Like, magic items in the DMG, they're like uncommon or common or rare or whatever, and they're just so unbalanced, and it's hard to like really wrap your head around how one magic item compares to another. I think overall that stuff, like having it perfectly balanced, doesn't matter. But I felt for us to make sure they all were starting on a similar foot, I used this to let them basically buy some magic items to start with. So the list sets a price for magic items, and it tries to balance those prices. And so I let them spend 1,500 gold on this list. That would let them buy +1 armor. Like, that's the best thing they could probably buy, is +1 armor. However, if they bought armor, I did make them pay for the base armor. That way nobody could like pick plate mail. So I kind of regret the way I did this, just because it was a bit complicated. But they could shop on this list, but the only stipulation was if they bought +1 armor, or any armor, they would need to pay out of their rolled starting gold for the base cost of the armor. And the only reason for that is that the chart doesn't take into account different types of armor. All +1 armor is 1,500 gold on this chart. And that doesn't really make sense. +1 studded leather should not be the same value as +1 plate mail, in my opinion. So I balance that out by making them pay the difference. So more on to the setting. We're doing Hot Springs Island, so the setting is Hot Springs Island. I'm pulling some stuff out of Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. It's not going to be in the Sword Coasts, but they got those character options. They're using that Pantheon where you can use that calendar. This is mostly to simplify my life, in case any questions about those things come up. The setting has mostly things that deal in like acid, poison, physical, or elemental kind of damage. There's no undead, I don't think. Very little if so. And yeah, so then I also tried to get them to limit their races to human, half-elf, elf, tiefling, or dragonborn. This is mostly to fit the feel of the campaign. I think only one person went outside of that set. And then I think once they're on the island, if they have to re-roll, I may let them pick something that makes sense from the island. So there may be some sort of like half ogre or something, because ogres are one of the factions on the island. So I allowed them to choose guns. I think only one of them bought a gun. So that'll be an interesting new thing to try. I think what I'm going to do with these is I'm going to make them be more like status effect kind of thing. So I imagine if you're shot with a musket or something, you're probably going to be knocked prone pretty easily. I could be wrong, but that's basically how I'm going to use it in play. Prone, done. And I may come up with some other stuff, but that's the idea I'm going with. So it'll do damage. It'll do whatever the list of damage is, but it's also going to be like, you can like pull your gun and, knock someone prone or something. I think that should be pretty cool. And it'll give somebody a fun option to do. Only one of them bought a gun, but I think they'll probably find some guns as they're on the island. And then I kind of went over, I gave them some like starting rumors, like, so the Martell Company is a powerful and wealthy trading company in this world that is controlling. I said it that they're controlling the waters around the Swordfish Islands. I don't know what the actual reality of the original Swordfish Islands is, so I'm just flying with whatever's in these books. All right. Regarding Hot Springs Island, this is believed to be the home of Hot Springs Island. People outside of the Martell Company don't exactly know unless maybe they've come across the field guide, which would be hard to get outside of the Martell Company. Swordfish Bay is the only known harbor in the Swordfish Islands, and it's run by the Martell Company, of course. And then there's some other rumors is that Hot Springs Island is something called the Isle of Light, which was a hub of a once powerful and opulent ancient elven civilization. This is a rumor that is true. The players, probably can guess that. Hot Springs Island is hard to find and in dangerous waters. This is not quite right. It is invisible. In the books, they tell you you can do whatever, but it's basically in this magical bubble, which makes it hard for some of the things inside are on the island to get out. But they say like it's up to you how that affects people trying to get in, and I've decided that it's basically invisible until you pass through the barrier. So what you see there is just open ocean, and we'll come back to that. The Martell Company is running regular expeditions on Hot Springs Island. That's certainly true. Although we'll probably come back to a lot of these, but I'm going to go through them. The Martell Company is hiring mercenaries, adventurers, and thieves like mad. They take a cut of treasure found on expeditions, certainly true. The Martell Company can arrange forgiveness of most crimes by leveraging their connections and influence. This is true. That's all from the books. Martell Company is smuggling something other than just treasure from expeditions. I haven't decided if this is true, but I think it's true. The Marketel Company is patrolling waters around the island. However, rumor is not hard to get by them, and others have found their way to the island. So there are other people on the island, and you could sneak by the Martel Company if you wanted to just get there without joining the Martel Company or something. I'm not sure if my players are going to join the Martel Company or not, but I am probably going to push them away from doing that at first. We'll come back to that as well. Okay, so we also outlined some things about... I'm not going to write all the rumors here, but we also outlined some things about the campaign. And then let's go down here, draw a line here, and then this is more specific to our exact campaign. So let's go over who our players are. So we have Mara, who is a tiefling. I think she's a rogue, but she's basically a sort of pirate smuggler, and she owns the ship that they're going to start on. So ship captain is the most important thing. She has a kind of shady background, but not necessarily completely shady. So I don't know if pirate's quite true. We have Richard or Dick. So he is a human barbarian, and he is a conspiracy theorist who thinks that something on the island is behind. Basically, he thinks he was abducted by aliens and probed and all that jazz, and he thinks the island has the answers to what happened to him. So, but he is a member of the crew. He basically joined the crew because he knew they were going to try and find Hot Springs Island. So, that's 2. We have Cecilia. So, this is a half-elf wizard. She has paid for passage. So she is on the boat and is trying to get to Hot Springs Island, and she paid Mara and her crew to get her there. She is an anthropologist. She's an anthropologist who is studying the history of sea elves, and she believes they originated from this Isle of Light. And she's half sea elf, so it's kind of like a family thing, she's doing her doctorate on this. She's interested for personal reasons as well. Who else do we have? We have, I think one person has not named their character yet. Let me find out. Oh, God. Okay. We'll skip this for now. So we have Nox. This is a Dragonborn fighter. He is sort of affiliated with the Martel Company, but he's sort of a native of the region. So he's actually in Swordfish Bay. So I'm going to go boat. The boat has a name. It's the Wave Humper. Actually, I'm not going to write out Wave Humper, but I'm going to put WH, Wave Humper. Not Waffle House, Wave Humper. So WH. He's starting in Swordfish Bay. So, Jesus Christ, I can't write. Okay. So he's starting in Swordfish Bay, and he's sort of a native of the region, and he's just kind of serving them. It's going to be interesting to try and get him connected to the party, but we'll talk about that in planning for session 1. The next one is apparently Omakure Otane. Why does he pick names like this? He is a Elven Ranger. And so he is... he's given me a bit of backstory, which is secret from the other players, in that he is actually doing... So he's part of a family company that is a competitor to Martel, and he's there looking for... they sent somebody from the family to do some reconnaissance, basically, and he's now going after them because they went missing. And then, I have 6. We have 6 players. So we have Father Wilmorn, And if you can't guess, this is a cleric. He is actually an Aasimar. I have no idea how to say that, but I assume it's Aasimar. Aasimar? Probably something like that. Cleric. Okay. What is he doing? He's already on Hot Springs Island. I did warn him that he probably wouldn't have much to do in session 1 because of this. But basically he's marooned there, and he was basically a cleric for hire for the Martell Company. But he doesn't want to be found by the Martell Company because he doesn't want to be put back to work. He wants to sort of escape his contract or whatever. I'm a little worried about this desire to escape, because he wants to escape his contract, he wants to escape Hot Springs Island. The problem is like, if they get off Hot Springs Island, what is his motivation to go back? So this is kind of an element of the campaign that I expect to have happen, is that they will eventually have periods where they leave the island and then go back. So far, this character has no reason to do that. It's kind of a problem. So this person's on the Wave Humper, and this person is on Hot Springs Island. And that's everybody. So 4 people are already on the Wave Humper. One person in the Swordfish Bay. The Wave Humper is heading towards Swordfish Bay at the beginning. And then from there, they expect to enlist with the Martell Company. And then from there, they want to run expeditions. I don't know that it's going to play out like that. We'll talk about that in just a moment. So what else did we determine? We kind of determined that they came from a place called the Adamantium Coast. It's not going to be very important at the beginning, but I'll write this. I'll say from Adamantium Coast. We don't have a specific city. I'll come up with it probably on the spot if I need it. The crew, there is a remaining crew. You can just imagine them as red shirts. They're all going to die, probably. It's elves, humans, tieflings, maybe a couple dwarves. Although there's only 8, so I'm probably just going to stick to elves, humans, and tieflings. And maybe dragonborn, but whatever. It's a small sloop kind of ship. It maybe has 8 cannons at most. Single mast kind of a deal. I actually do have some ship miniatures that I'm going to use. You can take a look at those. I'll probably put up a picture or a little video here. They're going to have a small one. I'll just use these for some small skirmishes, and if it becomes anything more, then I'll have to figure out what to do. I don't expect boat warfare or anything to be a huge part of the campaign, except maybe in the long run. I'll talk about that in planning session 1, because I'm kind of thinking ahead during session 1 to set up some other things. They're basically flying the colors of Adamantium Coast, which are blue and yellow. It's not Sweden. I asked them to start thinking about a party name. It's hard to say when or if they'll ever come up with that. I asked them to come up with a reason why they would be on the island and would want to stay there. Most of them would want like loot or information. Like I said, I am concerned about Father Wilmorn being there and wanting to get off. But hopefully we can find something to change his mind. We designated a party leader. This is something I haven't done before, but basically since we have 6 players and sometimes it's hard to pull a decision out of somebody, so the player for Mara, who is also the captain of the ship, is going to be the party leader. It's so if there's a final decision for the party, I'm going to get it from that person. We'll see how that works out. Most of the relationships are pretty simple. A couple of people are paying for transport to Hot Springs Island. One is a member of the crew. Nox has no affiliation to the crew right now, but I have plans just for setting that up. And Father Wilmorn has no tie, but I also have plans for how I'm going to get him to meet the party as well. Boo, 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 boo. I think at this point it's probably good to just jump over and start planning for session 1, which is, it is now midnight. So it's probably a good thing to go ahead and take care of, considering I have to do this tomorrow. I feel like I rambled on for quite a long time, but let's ramble on some more. So that's session 0. That's what we did. I don't plan on needing a lot of props. Like I said, I have some ships, some little ships. I printed up a map. And for session 1, I'm just going to move the ships around the map. We'll talk about that in the planning here. So session 1. All right, so session 1 is going to start with them on the boat. On the Wave Humper, barring 2 players. But I'll let them, like, if rolls need to be made, which they will, I'll let them roll for, like, crew or whatever. So one thing I would like to do is I would like to put them in a sea battle almost immediately. So what I plan to do is I'll have them coming into the Swordfish Islands, and they'll have some sort of encounter with a pirate vessel. And this doesn't seem like it's going to have any bearing on the long-term campaign, but I have a plan for this. So there's a reason I'm dropping this in. Most of session 1 is going to be somewhat railroaded. But once they're on the island, it's going to be a hex crawl, and it's going to be pretty sandboxy, or at least pretty open-ended. I'll talk about that in future session prep. But my plan is to basically... I don't know if the book suggests you roll on the spot for encounters. I think I'll probably roll a few up ahead of time, but we'll discuss that in the future. Because this session, we're not going to need that kind of encounter. So they're heading towards Swordfish Bay, and they want to join the Martell Company. But I'm going to have them encounter a pirate ship. And the way I plan on doing this is that they'll basically see the ship kind of off on the horizon, heading the same direction as them, maybe for a day or two as they're entering the island. At some point, the ship is going to stop moving and kind of go up in smoke and start sending out help signals. So it's going to be false help signals. So one of 2 things could happen. So Wave Humper avoids, in which case the pirate will chase. Wave Humper approaches. Knowing my players, I don't think they're going to do this. But if they approach it, pirates will have a surprise round on them, basically. Pirate surprise. And I'll just pick... In the DMG, there's a list of boats. I think... So basically, they're going to have like a sailing ship, which is a fairly... It's an okay boat. Wow, I really feel like the names in the waterborne vehicles don't make sense. So they're going to have like a sloop or like a small, like something a little smaller than a galleon. However, they're going to encounter something a bit bigger than them. I'll have to stat this. I'll probably stat it like tomorrow as I'm setting up or whatever. Or I'll just make something up on the spot. The main idea is that there'll be some cannon exchange. It doesn't matter. So there's going to be some cannon exchange. We'll try that out. And so either way, this should happen. So this is what I mean by it's going to be a little bit railroady in the first section. So cannon exchange. And then at some point, Wave Humper should get some damage, ideally. So it doesn't need to be too much damage, but I basically want to give them even more reason to go to Swordfish Bay. So this is going to be a hint to go to Swordfish Bay, instead of skipping and going directly to Hot Springs Island. So I do want them to go to Swordfish Bay. And then I also want them to... I'm going to have them see an identifiable pirate. So the ship should be identifiable, so it's going to be a bit of a different color than other ships that they've seen. I think it's going to be just like a cherry kind of wood color or something, where everything else is more like an oak. It's going to be something that nature. And the pirate's going to just be like in really flashy red or something. And the idea is that this is a character I can bring back later. So, for example, my thinking is they could come back to this character in a couple ways. I have no specific plans, but let's say they lose their ship, then maybe they encounter this ship and get a chance to steal it or something. or maybe they get a chance to parlay for passage off the island. So I think these might be pirates they encounter on Hot Springs Island. Or maybe later they keep their ship and I bring it back and they try to steal whatever loot they get off of Hot Springs Island. It's just something I want to put in place to have a sort of seaborne adversary that I can pull out of my pocket. That's the idea with this encounter. I'll make sure to bring him back somehow. So we're just going to set this up. And at some point during this exchange, the Martel Company is going to come by on a patrol and chase them off. Chase pirates. I should probably name this pirate ahead of time. So I need a captain name. We're going to call him Captain... I'm thinking these are going to be dwarven pirates. Not going to be a lot of dwarves in this campaign, so I thought this could be an interesting way to throw them in. And it also makes sense why the ship looks different, because dwarves are supposed to be from a faraway place, so the ship might be built out of something completely different, or a different kind of wood or whatever. So, as far as his name goes, Flaskback. Oaken Gut. What about Flint Gut? I hate naming things. It doesn't really matter, but they are going to learn his name. This is going to reinforce. It kind of reinforces the chance that they'll remember if he comes back up, because odds are they're not going to remember this character. Such is the way it goes. How about Captain Hornbuckle the Drunk? And he is the captain of Shippy names. Need a ship name. Need a shippy name. Fantasy ship names. These are terrible ship names. It's gonna be made out of cherry wood, and we're gonna call it the Scary Cherry. Or the Cherry Ferry. Cherry Ferry. Everything looks weird when you write it all caps. Okay, Captain Hornbuckle the Drunk of the Cherry Ferry. It's a stupid name, but that's maybe for the better. Okay, so they're gonna have this encounter, and then they'll signal. So they're gonna signal to report. They're gonna tell them to report this incident, basically, using signals or whatever in Swordfish Bay. There's one encounter. So that's kind of the opening scene. They'll make their way towards Swordfish Bay after this, possibly damaged and a little bit slow or something. I may give them some passing encounters with, like, they'd be roleplay only or scenic, or they'll probably just directly, because we won't have a lot of time, so they'll probably just directly get to Swordfish Bay. In Swordfish Bay, they're going to try to enlist. So they're going to have to do a few things. They're going to do it. I can pretty much expect a few things from them. So let's start off in the beginning. The contact that they have in Swordfish Bay is given in the book. The name is definitely Rand. So he was a captain of the original expedition here, but he is now governor of Swordfish Bay, at least in my campaign. I think Swordfish Bay is on an island called Rand's Retreat. Swordfish Bay is on Rand's Retreat. You probably cannot read anything I'm writing. I think it's Jeremy Rand. So contact Jeremy Rand. He is governor. I imagine they'll come into the port. They'll look for this guy, and they're not going to have any trouble finding him. They're going to try to enlist, but he's going to basically look over the crew and the passengers who want to enlist and evaluate them. And what he's going to say is, you can enlist, but you have to remove all elves from the crew. So he's not going to willingly say why they must remove all elves. Basically, I'm going to try and play this where he's basically just a dick about it and wants them to remove all the elves. It won't say why. They'll be able to learn through, like, social encounters or whatever. The reason is that in the book it talks about how the different elementals and things hate elves now because of the way that the ancient elves treated them. And so elves are often attacked. And so I'm going to play it like any group with an elf. Like, their experience has been that groups with elves in them die. So they've stopped sending elves to the island. Most to protect their crew and, to protect the elves. So it's not like he hates elves, but I'm going to make it come across like he hates elves. Nox is going to witness this. And so him being a good character, and I've mentioned to him that he's going to witness something he won't like, is going to, I hope, pick up on the cue to offer to help them get to the island. Because he doesn't know how to get to the islands per se, but he has a general idea. So Nox knows stuff about the island because he has the field guide. Jesus, I cannot talk. Okay, so they're gonna try to enlist. Rand's gonna be a dick about it and try to get them to remove all the elves from the team, which they're not going to like. They're not going to do. I'm going to make it to where some of the crew is elves. They have 2 elves on board that are players, so this is absolutely something they're not going to do. I don't think right now Rand will budge on this. He might, if they go to the island, are successful in, like, looting things or whatever, and then come back and, like, try to make a deal, then he might budge on this. If pursued, then they'll learn why. We'll say like most of the crews they've sent to the island have done okay unless they have an elf in them or elves in them, and then those almost all disappear. And we'll just kind of, I'm going to play this off the cuff a bit, but so it's going to foreshadow elven danger, which will probably make the party uneasy, which is good. We want to make them a little bit scared. And then it's also going to keep them from joining Rand's guild immediately. And I kind of want that because I'm really hoping I can get them to crash onto the island and be stuck there for a while. And this is part of the long-term setup, is that I want them to be there and to start establishing themselves on the island so that they don't have a lot of reasons to leave. Where right now, like, they're... other than a couple of them have pretty strong goals on the island, and so that those are sort of ropes I can dangle, but other ones don't, and so I want them to be there for a while so that those goals emerge. So I want to have some time to develop hooks for everyone. This is going to be the gist of their time in Swordfish Bay. They'll probably need to stay and do repairs, so they'll probably be there for a few days. And then, if they don't enlist, Rand's basically going to tell them to fuck off. At which point, I expect they'll head straight for Hot Springs Island. So when they do that, I think they're going to have another encounter. But let me add a few things here of what what else might happen. And these are just going to be like loose notes. So I think they might have a pub encounter. Like, they might do some pub drinking. So there's drinking. And so they may learn some rumors, and there's a table of rumors in the book that I can roll on, but they'll probably learn more stuff about, like, the elven thing, and maybe... I'm going to play this off the cuff, based off what I've internalized from the books, but they'll have a chance to learn some stuff. And if they do this, and they have not yet learned about the elven dangers, then I think I'm going to set up an encounter where they run into Rand while Rand is drunk, and then he'll be a lot more forthcoming. And my goal with that is not to enable them to enlist, but it's to make him look like not such a bad guy, such that they hate him. I don't want them to necessarily hate him in the long run, but I do want them to... So he'll be a bit more open, but he'll still be very, very firm on the elven thing. That's my idea. So, Swordfish Bay, and then we'll have our next encounter, which is probably going to be the last encounter. We usually only get through like 2 or 3 encounters, even like social stuff, per night. They're going to probably go to Hot Springs Island, so we're going to just call this Hot Springs Island. I don't think there'll be a whole lot of roles here. It's going to be mostly exposition, but I have ideas for this. So they'll go down. I think I think I will have some sort of foreshadowing that Rand tells people to watch these people, the party. Rand doesn't trust them. This is a terrible video. I can feel it already. Okay, so as they go down on Hot Springs Island, I think they're going to encounter a Martell galleon. The Martell galleon's not going to be aggressive. It's going to try and get them to stay away. But what's going to happen... So I'm going to let it depend on where the party enters the bubble. And the bubble is defined in the books. So, based on the way that the islands are laid out, and you can see this here. So I basically am using this map made by Mike Overbow and whatever with HexKit. I basically copied this map and then I printed it out, or I printed a portion of it out, and then it's going to have Hot Springs Island missing. So this is Rand's retreat. This is Hot Springs Island. When they go off, I have some little like boat miniatures, so we're gonna do a little search, and then so depending on how they go up will determine whether or not they get to keep their boat. At least past session 1. I think there'll still be things that could happen where they might lose their boat. Like, for example, if they leave their boat, then they might come back and the pirates that we talked about earlier have taken it or something. I eventually want to take their boat away for a while. So here's the bubble. So if they cross like here, like around here, they're going to crash because the bubble is... They're basically going to go through the bubble... or the island will be invisible. They go through, and they're immediately facing rocks. This could happen up here too, but I don't expect them to go that far. So the odds of them crashing are actually fairly low based on the bubble, but I expect them to come in right around here, just the way it lays out on the map. It sits like this. So it's the shortest path. So this is Swordfish Bay, and this is Rand's retreat. So if they're leaving from here, the shortest path to this area, and this is where they believe it is, based on what they've learned, is going to bring them right smack into this point. And this is where I'm trying to start them. It may not happen. If they decide to veer off, then they veer off, and they'll get to keep their boat for a while. But yeah, once they cross basically this point, they'll see the island. Whenever they cross in, they'll see the island, and then I'll deal with that. I hope that made sense. So Martell is going to try to run them off. Martell is going to send a boat after them. Like, the way I am going to play this out is Martell is going to have their, like, galleon, and they're going to send out a longboat from the galleon or something. And it's going to look like the longboat's trying to cut them off or something, the way it is. But at some point, as they get close to the bubble, I'm going to say, like, the longboat sort of disappears into the waves or something. Disappears. This is going to kind of foreshadow that there's the bubble. So Martell is going to send this longboat. It's going to disappear into the bubble, at which point I expect they'll probably crash somewhere. Now, I think I'm going to have them crash no matter what, but the extent of the damage is going to be worse if it's like one of those, if they cross right through the bubble and then find land, the crash is going to be terrible. If they go somewhere else, they might just get beached or something. So crashes or is beached, or they might have a minor crash that requires repairs. Martell will witness this, and they'll know because eventually they'll see the longboat again. What this really is them sending a longboat to try and maybe go to shore to rescue them, or to capture them and bring them back. So they're going to send this longboat. The party will see the longboat disappear, which will signal, and almost immediately they will cross through the bubble themselves. They'll crash, hopefully badly. The boat will get smashed up on some rocks. Most of the non-player characters are all going to die if it's that bad. and then they'll have to make some like saving throws against various damage and whatever. So they'll have to try and like escape the boat while it's crashing. So I imagine the boat will like crash into the rocks. It'll get dragged back out a little bit and then come back in and crash again. I'm really going to try and push it towards this outcome. So I might use like boat positions and stuff to try and guide them towards that exact outcome. So crashing multiple times. There's no guarantee, but this is the outcome I'm hoping for. Crashing, so it's going to crash multiple times. They're going to be like trying to jump off the boat onto the rocks. They're going to be, you know, trying to keep standing. They're going to be like trying to avoid being crushed by the boat as it keeps crashing into the shore. And once they get all up on the shore safely, they're going to see the Martel longboat kind of do a pass by, see a bunch of bodies in the water, and the longboat is just gonna fucking ditch them. They're gonna go back and just take it as they're gonna assume that it basically was a full loss, or that the remainder is not worth saving, or because of the risk of going onto the island themselves, and then they'll be on the island. I'm not sure yet, and it really depends on whether they crash or are beached. I'm not sure. It'll probably cost them some gear like rations and stuff. So I imagine they're not going to have their packs on. So whatever's in their packs is probably going to be lost. Unless they manage to get it off the boat. I'll set up a way for them to like salvage stuff from the boat. So they won't be completely without. I plan to at least throw it at them that they lose that stuff. After this, we're going to leave on a cliffhanger. So I assume they'll start kind of like walking around the island or whatever. I'm just basically going to leave it where they're starting to explore and they hear screaming in the woods. What's his name? Oh, Wilmorn will run. He's basically going to be chased. So, well, I'll make this up on the spot basically, but he's being chased. We're not going to learn by what yet. But he's being chased, and he's chased out of the woods in front of them, or out of the jungle in front of them. And that's where we're going to end the session. That sets us up for an encounter at the beginning of session 2, and it also leaves a bit of a cliffhanger because it's going to be, because of the holidays, it's going to be about 3 weeks between session 1 and session 2. I'll have a lot of time for like builds. Like working on terrain and stuff, but I won't have to do a whole lot of prep. Yeah, this is the prep for session 1. There really wasn't a lot to it, even though it took me forever to record this. What did that take? I'm going to try to cut this down to under an hour, but it took me almost 2 hours to record this, so that's fun. Hopefully that'll get better. But I did do most of the prep that I need for session 1, even though I kind of had a lot of this in mind already, so, you know, take that for what it's worth. So after this session, I will probably work on terrain, and I'm going to work on terrain in whatever miniature. I'm going to try to do the player miniatures, terrain, and maybe some monster miniatures, especially whatever encounter this will be. That way I'll have all that stuff ready for session 2. Yeah, pretty cool. I hope this was interesting. It was definitely interesting to do, and yeah, I'm looking forward to doing this. I think it was helpful to kind of like talk through all of this. Hopefully it'll make me more organized in the future. So I may do a video before the session 2 prep video. I'll save the retrospective on session 1 for the session 2 prep video, but I think I may do a video about my terrain and all of that because I'll have a few weeks to work on that fairly heavily, especially around Thanksgiving. So yeah, thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful, and I hope you guys are having fun. Take care. Bye.